Hi, I'm Hannah Ladd-Jones and welcome to this week's MASTS Cast, the weekly online update video about what's been happening in the MASTS community this week. In this week's edition, I chat to Alejandro Gallego from Marine Scotland Science about the Dynamics and Properties Marine System Research theme. We have an update from the SMMR team and also news from the European Marine Board plenary meeting that happened this week. This week's MASTS webinar presenter was Dr. Cara Layton from the University of Aberdeen. Cara was actually our first international speaker as she presented from Guelph, Canada, where she currently resides before she moves here to Aberdeen after lockdown. Cara's talk was titled, Using Genomics to Investigate Climate Change Response in Marine Species. Of course, this whole session was recorded along with its Q&A session, so if you want to find out more, please check out the link that is below this video. Next week's presenter is Dr. Christopher Sweeting from the Marine Management Organisation, and his talk is titled Non-Lethal Deterrent Options for Mitigation of Seal Fishery Interactions. There's still time to register, so please check out the registration link that is below this video, and you can also sign up to all our other talks that we have coming up. If you want to present on the 29th of July, please get in contact with us at our usual email address, and of course there are dates in August as well. And now for my chat with Alejandro Gallego from Marine Scotland Science. As a leader for the DPMS research theme, we chat about the theme's recent call for case studies and what that actually means and how people can get involved.
We call them topical cross-disciplinary challenges. So basically, it's all about picking a topic of interest to masts in general, so a marine topic, and getting a group of experts together to discuss the progress so far, the status of knowledge, to identify potential research gaps or knowledge gaps, and to come up with ideas on how to address those, which can be things like funding opportunities and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So I've seen in the call some previous examples have tended to be associated with geographical areas, but that's not actually a sticking point for a case study, really. But they've been on Loch Linney and Sullom Voe, Loch Etive, and they tend to follow a format of a 1.5 days to 2 days residential workshop.
Yeah. So the topics, as you say, they have been largely geographically based, and there's been one on the Mengele Reef, which is a fairly rare, relatively shallow area of cold water coral, where again quite a lot of work has been done, and there was one on the Ellet line, which is a hydrographic section that goes from Scotland all the way to Iceland, extended Ellet line. And again, that was, I think, the 40th anniversary of the line. So again, it was a good opportunity to get together and synthesize knowledge. So yeah, they've been really fruitful, very, very successful. And we run out of ideas, and we're hoping that people will come up with new ideas for.
Yeah. So judging from what you said, it's a lot of collaboration or trying to work on those knowledge gaps that we have about particular areas or topics that relate back to the research theme of dynamics and properties of marine systems. So for those in our MASTS community who have an idea for a proposal that could form a case study, what kind of information should they be aware of, like the deadline as well for this call?
So just a brief description of what the idea is all about, what format you would like it to take. As you said earlier, traditionally it's been like a 1.5 2 day residential workshop. Obviously, in the current circumstances, it's a bit more difficult to do that. So we are open to virtual meetings instead, even though, hopefully we'll be able to revert to the physical workshop at some time in the future, because I think it led to a level of personal interaction and networking that was actually quite useful. And potentially what outcome you expect out of it. I mean, the minimum is tended to be a report, but it could be a peer review publication, funding proposal, something like that. And potentially it would be useful to get an idea of the level of attendance you expect, who your target audience might be, and all that. And when we get to the point when we get a number of proposals, we'll look at them and then we'll work with the proposals to identify the most suitable ones and how we are going to take this forward.
If you're interested in submitting a proposal, there are a couple of points that you also need to bear in mind that weren't mentioned in our chat. So the proposal needs to fit on one side of an A4 piece of paper. It needs to include costings of up to £2,000 and an indication of who you want to target, the level of interest, what the key research question is, why is it relevant, timely, and all questions need to be submitted to the MASTS email address as well as the actual proposal in the end. So there's also a link that can be found below this video for previous case studies that can kind of give you a bit more guidance about what they focused on. And please submit anything and any questions to our usual email address. And now for an update from the SMMR champion, Mark James, who will also have news from this week's European Marine Board plenary meeting.
Hello everyone, Mark James here. Just a few quick updates this week. Many of you will know that the COP26 has been rescheduled and the dates now have been announced as the 1st to the 12th November 2021. The reason that as MASTS we're interested in that is because we hope to pull together some events which may either be directly or indirectly associated with COP26, with the idea that we can raise the profile of marine science in Scotland and more generally. So that's really just a heads up, new date, and we'll be contacting you in the next few weeks and months about how we might interact with that process. Second thing is that this week I was involved in the European Marine Board spring plenary meeting, which was held online. It was due to take place in Gothenburg, but it was held successfully online. This was my last meeting as one of the vice chairs of the Marine Board. I've come to the end of my tenure now, and I'm pleased to say that Alan Evans of NOC was elected as a new vice chair, and therefore will be there to ensure that UK interests are well represented and that we have a reasonably high profile within the EMB as we move towards the consequences of Brexit. Just a reminder, the Marine Board is actually constituted under the Council of Europe, and therefore we can still remain members of the Marine Board even in a post-Brexit world, which may be very useful to us. It also keeps us in touch with the marine science community across Europe and also some of the big initiatives that are going on. It's important to recognise that one of the functions of the EMB is to produce these policy briefs and future science briefs that have quite a strong influence both at national governmental level and certainly within the EU in terms of directing their thinking and sometimes even directing funding opportunities. Some ones that are coming up at the moment are the big data in marine science. We've got next generation European research vessels, and one that may be important in terms of those thinking about, for example, bidding for the UK SMMR programme, which I'll talk about in a moment, is the SOPHIE project, which has produced the Strategic Research Agenda on Oceans and Human Health, and that publication is now live, and it may well be worth looking at in relation to the SMMR programme. There are also working groups now active and producing material that will form these briefing documents in the areas of marine geohazards. There's one big one that's just started on underwater noise, and there's another one on international ocean governance and ocean literacy. So I would urge you to go to the EMB website and to look at some of these documents and some of the opportunities potentially in the future for input. One of the things that we'll be producing as future MASTS casts over the next few weeks are some interviews with what we call the EMB ambassadors. These are young PhD students or early postdocs that have been taken on as ambassadors by the EMB to not only promote the EMB, but also engage with the wider marine community, particularly the younger marine community across Europe, and to gain a better understanding of the interactions between the EMB and at policy level within Europe. And they'll be talking to us over the next few weeks. Just to highlight also the fact that the EU's biodiversity strategy for 2030 has recently been released. I haven't looked at this in detail, but it seems to be a fairly wide-reaching and far-reaching document. How that colours what we do in the UK is another question, but I would urge you to look at this document and perhaps think about how that may influence what we do in the UK going forwards. Finally, just a word on the SMMR programme. Please keep interrogating the SMMR website. It's important particularly to look at the frequently asked questions section because that is being updated on a regular basis and it's possible to miss something. Obviously, the SMR program is quite complex in the sense that we want engagement between stakeholders, particularly policy stakeholders, and those in the research community. The idea is obviously that we want to develop better relationships going forward between policy makers and those in the research community. But in the development of proposals for the SMMR program, what we've asked is that in the first instance, those who are thinking about generating proposals or even notifications of intent to produce proposals, which is what you have to produce within the first 4 weeks of the program, we're urging you to talk to both myself, David Patterson in the first instance as the program champions, rather than going directly to policy stakeholders. The reason for this is because we don't want them to be overburdened. They are clearly at the moment being asked repetitive questions, and they're also being asked to become party to projects, which is not appropriate. So please, if you're thinking about putting a notification of intent together and you're looking for that stakeholder contact, please come to us in the first instance, and we will try to field your questions as best we can, or to make the necessary contacts with the appropriate policy stakeholders. Thanks very much for listening, and hope to talk to you again soon.
And lastly, the MASTS Coastal Forum has released a funding call for small flexible grants of up to £500. These can cover research expenses such as those for equipment, and more information about the fund can be found below, and the deadline is the 26th of June at 4 o'clock. So please check that out if you're interested, and they obviously have to relate back to the Coastal Forum. Next week, I will discuss and outline activities that are being organised by our MASTS partner institutions in light of June 8th being World Ocean Day. These will vary from webinars to talks to special events that you can do with younger members of your family. And if we haven't already been in communication, please reach out using my usual email address, and we can discuss how you can be featured in next week's MASTS cast, which will all be around World Ocean Day. So that just leaves me to say, stay safe and have a great weekend.